Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the dusty highlands of Ethiopia, where ancient stone churches are carved straight into the rock and sacred chants echo through incense-filled monasteries, a very different image of Jesus has lived quietly for centuries. It is not the fair-skinned figure popularized in Western paintings or Renaissance cathedrals. No, in the oldest Christian kingdom on earth, Jesus is remembered as a black Hebrew, a child of Africa, born not into the world of European nobility, but among people who looked like the people of Ethiopia themselves. And according to the Ethiopian Bible, a text older and more complete than the King James Version, this is not a theory. It is sacred truth. This claim might sound shocking to many who were raised on the Western portrayal of Christianity, but it is not new. Ethiopia, one of the first nations to embrace Christianity in the 4th century, has preserved not only ancient scriptures, but also an oral and cultural memory that tells a different version of biblical history, one rooted deeply in Africa. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church still holds texts never included in the Western canon, including the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the Kebra Nagast, books that directly link Ethiopia to Israel, to David, to Solomon, and even to the Messiah himself. To understand this claim, we must unearth the long-buried African roots of Christianity, a religion born in the ancient Near East, not Europe. Jesus of Nazareth was a Hebrew born in Roman-occupied Judea, a land sitting at the crossroads of Africa and Asia, just miles from Egypt. His family fled into Egypt for safety as a baby, a decision that only made sense if the infant and his parents could blend in physically with the local population, people who were and still are darker-skinned Africans. It would have been impossible for a white-skinned, European-looking baby to disappear into the crowds of Alexandria or Memphis. He would have stood out like fire in the night. The significance of Ethiopia in biblical history runs deeper than most Western scholars acknowledge. According to the Book of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, the Queen of Sheba traveled from the land of Cush, often identified as ancient Ethiopia, to meet King Solomon. The Ethiopian tradition claims she bore Solomon a son, Menelik, who would become Ethiopia's first emperor. This child, raised in Solomon's wisdom, was said to have taken the Ark of the Covenant back to Ethiopia, a claim still central to Ethiopian Christian belief. But the story doesn't stop there. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's national epic, written in Guizi, a liturgical language older than Latin, provides an African-centered narrative that links the royal bloodline of Ethiopia directly to the House of David. This is the same bloodline from which the Messiah was prophesied to come. In Ethiopian theology, Jesus is both the Lion of Judah and the rightful heir to the Davidic line, and that line runs through Africa. Western scholars long dismissed these traditions as legend, but many modern historians and theologians are beginning to reevaluate the African origins of Christianity with renewed seriousness. The Book of Enoch, considered canonical in Ethiopia, describes visions and divine beings in language and imagery much closer to Egyptian and Nubian cosmology than anything found in Western Europe. Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, was said to have been taken up to heaven without dying, a concept echoed in Ethiopian mysticism, which also teaches that Enoch will return. Moreover, archaeological and genetic evidence places ancient Hebrew populations in and around the Nile Valley. Communities like the Beta Israel Ethiopian Jews who have lived in the country for over 2 millennia trace their lineage to the tribe of Dan, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. These African Hebrews practiced circumcision, kosher dietary laws, Sabbath observance, and celebrated Jewish festivals long before contact with European or Middle Eastern rabbis. Their very existence challenges the racial assumptions that Judaism, and by extension Christianity, were solely Semitic or European traditions. If we return to Scripture, the clues are abundant. The Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs, includes a declaration, "I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem." The Hebrew word used here is sh korah, which means dark-skinned or black. Many early Christian thinkers in Africa did not shy away from this verse. In fact, they embraced it. Even the prophet Moses, a towering figure of the Old Testament, married a Cushite woman, again an Ethiopian, according to Numbers 12:1. This union caused such outrage among his own people that God had to intervene. If the early biblical figures were European in appearance, why would marriage to an African provoke such controversy? Unless, of course, these biblical figures themselves were not white, but varying shades of brown, indistinguishable, in fact, from their African neighbors. Perhaps the most important turning point in the African Christian story was the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch, recorded in Acts 8 verses 26 to 40. This unnamed court official was reading the book of Isaiah in his chariot when the apostle Philip approached him. After discussing the prophecy about the suffering servant, a clear foreshadowing of Jesus, the eunuch asked to be baptized immediately. He was not merely a bystander in Christian history. He was its first African convert, baptized even before Paul began his missions. His inclusion, so early in the Christian story, is a clear signal that the gospel was not meant for Europeans alone. It was rooted in Africa from the beginning. Even early Christian iconography supports this. The oldest images of Mary and Jesus, like the Black Madonna of Chenstohova or the ancient frescoes in Nubia, portray them as dark-skinned, even black. These images were not anomalies. They were reflections of the early Christian world, a world in which the Messiah and his mother were not blonde-haired and blue-eyed, but African-featured, Semitic, and deeply connected to the cultures and peoples of the Nile and beyond. The whitening of Jesus is a phenomenon that came centuries later, largely shaped by European political and religious ambitions. During the Renaissance, Jesus was painted in the image of Caesar Borgia, the infamous son of Pope Alexander VI. These images became tools of empire, justifying colonization, slavery, and the forced Christianization of non-European peoples. The image of a white Christ standing above a kneeling African slave was burned into the consciousness of entire continents. But Ethiopia remained a place where the older image, the true image, never faded. Today, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church continues to preserve the memory of Jesus as a black Hebrew, descended from David, born in a region of brown and black faces, and raised among a people whose history includes both Jewish and African heritage. Their liturgies are sung in Guizi, their Bibles uncut by European councils, their theology untouched by Rome or Geneva. They offer the world not a revision, but a restoration, a return to the Jesus before empire, before paintings, before the lie of whiteness overtook the truth of the desert and the Nile. In a world still wrestling with race, colonialism, and spiritual identity, this vision of Jesus as an African, as a Hebrew, as one who came from among the oppressed to liberate the oppressed, is both revolutionary and ancient. It challenges not only how we see Christ, but how we see ourselves. It calls us back to the roots, to the beginning, to Ethiopia, where Jesus is still black, still Hebrew, and still deeply, powerfully African.